First contact with terror. The command center of the Astrine Alliance flagship Celestial Harmony had never been so silent. Commander Ilara Solis stood motionless, her luminescent skin dimmed to a pale blue as the holographic display showed the unthinkable. Outpost Zenith, their most fortified defensive position, had fallen. Casualties? She finally asked, her melodic voice barely audible. Total, Commander, replied Strategic Officer Varen, his forearms moving rapidly across control panels. No survivors detected. The Vex left no one. Around the circular command center, 24 Astrian officers, each with their characteristic blue skin, elongated limbs, and eyes that seemed to hold galaxies within them, watched in horror as the recording continued. The Vex Dominion ships, angular and black as the void itself, methodically reduced Zenith's defenses to atoms. The station's shields, considered impenetrable just days ago, collapsed like tissue paper against the Vex's weapons. This is the third outpost in 14 cycles, Science Director Naira said, her bioluminescent patterns flashing with distress. Their technology shouldn't be this advanced. We've miscalculated. Commander Solis touched a control crystal, freezing the image on a Vex warship. Unlike the elegant curved lines of Astrine vessels, designed to harmonize with the cosmic energies, Vex ships were jagged, almost crystalline, as though they were meant to wound space itself. Not their technology, Solis said quietly. Their ruthlessness. We expected them to negotiate when met with resistance, to consider terms when casualties mounted. They haven't. They simply continue. The Astrine Alliance had stood as a beacon of civilization for over 12,000 years. Comprising 7 sentient species across 32 star systems, they had cultivated peace through diplomatic finesse and technological advancement. Their neural networks allowed instant communication across vast distances. Their energy systems drew power from the quantum fabric itself. Their medical science had all but eliminated death from natural causes. Yet none of that mattered against an enemy who viewed mercy as weakness. The High Council is requesting your assessment and recommendation. Commander, Communications Specialist Thila said, her voice trembling slightly. Solis closed her eyes, feeling the weight of billions of lives pressing down on her consciousness. The Astrian way had always been to seek understanding, to find common ground, to elevate through knowledge. But the Vex had rebuffed every diplomatic overture with brutal efficiency. Tell them. She hesitated, knowing her next words would shatter millennia of tradition. Tell them we cannot negotiate with the Vex. We cannot deter them. We must prepare for full-scale war. A collective gasp rippled through the command center. War, not defense, not containment, was almost heretical to Astrine philosophy. Our defensive capabilities are insufficient, Strategic Officer Varen noted, displaying tactical projections. Even if we redirect all resources to military applications, simulations give us less than a 16% chance of survival. What about the Concordat? Asked Naira. Surely the other advanced civilizations. The Meridian Concordat remains neutral. Solis interrupted. They've made it clear they view this as a regional conflict. The command center fell silent again. The Astrine Alliance, for all its advancement, stood alone against extinction. There is one possibility, said an unexpected voice. All eyes turned to Elder Qasim, the ship's historical advisor. The ancient Astrine rarely spoke during tactical meetings, his role being primarily ceremonial in modern times. In the historical archives, there are references to a species from an uncharted sector. A species that, according to legend, evolved not through cooperation like the Astrians, or through technological assimilation like the Vex, but through conflict. Conflict. Naira's bioluminescence flickered with confusion. What species evolves through conflict? One that faced extinction-level challenges repeatedly throughout its development. Qasim replied. One that turned adversity into advantage. They're called humans. The word hung in the air, unfamiliar yet somehow ominous. "I've never heard of this species in any contemporary database," said Varen, skepticism evident in his tone. "Because they haven't achieved interstellar civilization. At least not by our definition," Kesim explained. "Our long-range scans detected primitive warp signatures from their system nearly 2 centuries ago, but the High Council deemed them too volatile for contact." Solis's eyes widened. "Too volatile. We've made contact with over 50 developing species. These were different," Kesim said carefully. "Initial observations suggested they spent more resources on weaponry than any species we've encountered. They appeared to be constantly at war with their environment, with each other. The Council decided to quarantine their system until they either destroyed themselves or evolved beyond their violent tendencies." A stunned silence followed this revelation. "You're suggesting we seek help from a quarantined, primitive species?" Varen asked incredulously. "How would they even reach us?" Elder Kissim's aged face showed the hint of a smile. "Who said they were primitive? Technologically, perhaps, but their advancement has been unconventional. And as for reaching us," he turned to Solis. "Commander, do you recall the unexplained energy signature detected near the Lysithea Nebula 3 cycles ago?" Solis nodded slowly. "An anomalous warp bubble. We assumed it was a natural phenomenon." "It wasn't," Kesim said. "I believe it was them. Exploring, testing the boundaries of their capabilities. Even if we could contact them," Naira interjected, "why would they help us?" "Because," Kesim replied, "if historical accounts are accurate, there's one thing humans cannot resist: a fight where the odds are stacked against them." Commander Solis stared at the frozen image of the Vex warship, destruction incarnate. The Astrine Alliance had reached the pinnacle of civilization. Art, science, philosophy. They had created wonders that would last until the stars burned out. But they had forgotten something essential along the way: how to survive when faced with an enemy that wanted nothing but their annihilation. "Specialist Thela," she said finally, "prepare a directed quantum transmission to the coordinates Elder Kesim provides. Send all relevant data on the Vex, our tactical situation, and," she paused, "a request for military assistance. This goes against every protocol established by the High Council," Varen warned. "The High Council asked for my recommendation to ensure our survival," Solis replied, her voice finding new strength. "This is it. We need warriors. And it seems we've been avoiding the most proficient ones in the galaxy." 73 hours later, as the Celestial Harmony maintained a defensive position near the Lyra 7 outpost, alarms suddenly blared across the ship. "Unknown vessel emerging from warp," announced the sensor operator. "Configuration: it's like nothing in our database." On the main view screen, space itself seemed to tear open, not with the elegant ripple of Astrine warp technology, but with a violent, thunderous breach. Through this rupture emerged a ship that defied Astrine aesthetic sensibilities. Where Astrine vessels were sleek and organic in design, this ship was angular, asymmetrical, and bristling with what were unmistakably weapon systems. Its hull bore scorch marks and what appeared to be hasty repairs, giving it the appearance of a predator scarred from countless battles. "Dimensions indicate a mid-range vessel," reported Varen. "But power readings? Impossible. How are they containing that much energy in such a primitive shell?" Before anyone could respond, a communication request pinged through their systems, not through the standard quantum channels, but through crude electromagnetic waves. "They're using radio frequency communications," Thela said with disbelief. "I haven't seen this technology outside of historical archives." "Accept the transmission," ordered Commander Solis. The view screen shifted to show the bridge of the alien vessel. Collective gasps echoed through the command center as the Astrines beheld humans for the first time. They were bipedal, like many species, but their appearance was jarring. No bioluminescence. No graceful, elongated limbs. Just solid, compact bodies that suggested density and strength. Their skin varied in shade, but lacked the ethereal quality of Astrine blue. And their eyes, small, intensely focused, missing the cosmic depth of Estrene perception, darted around with predatory awareness. At the center stood what appeared to be their commander, a figure of medium height with skin, the color of their planet's soil and facial hair that formed a short, dark beard. A jagged scar ran from temple to jaw on the left side of the face. "This is Captain Marcus Thorne of the Earth strike vessel Nemesis," the figure announced in a deep, gravelly voice. "We received your distress call. Understand you've got a pest problem that needs exterminating." Commander Solus blinked slowly, trying to process both the crude translation and the casual approach to what was, for the Estrenes, an apocalyptic crisis. "I am Commander Ilara Solus of the Estrene Alliance flagship Celestial Harmony," she replied with practiced diplomatic poise. "Thank you for responding to our transmission. We face an existential threat from the Vex Dominion and—" "Yeah, we reviewed your data packet," Captain Thorne interrupted, causing several Estrene officers to flinch at the breach of protocol. "Nasty customers, these Vex. Attack without provocation, no interest in negotiation, strip mine populated worlds for resources." He shrugged. "We've dealt with worse." Solus exchanged glances with her officers, unsure if the translation was accurate. Dealt with worse than the most devastating force the Estrene Alliance had encountered in 12 millennia. "Captain Thorne," she continued carefully, "perhaps we should establish a formal diplomatic channel to discuss potential collaboration." A harsh sound burst from the human. A laugh, Solus realized, though it contained little warmth. "With respect, Commander, diplomacy seems to have failed you already. But sure, let's talk. I'll bring a shuttle over to your fancy ship in 30 minutes. Thorne out." The transmission cut abruptly, leaving the command center in shocked silence. "They're sending a physical delegation?" Naira asked, incredulous. "Not a virtual presence." "Apparently so," replied Solus, still processing the encounter. "Prepare a reception area in the diplomatic suite. And alert security, but ensure they understand these are potential allies." As the preparations began, Elder Kasim approached Commander Solus privately. "You seem troubled beyond the obvious, Commander." Solus nodded slowly. "That vessel, the Nemesis, it's a warship designed for a single purpose." "Yes," agreed Kasim. "That's why we contacted them." "No, you don't understand," Solus said, her voice hushed. "Our scans indicate it carries enough firepower to challenge a Vex cruiser, if a mid-range vessel of their fleet possesses such capacity." "You're wondering what their actual military capability might be," Kasim finished her thought. "And what it means for the balance of power in this sector if they succeed against the Vex." Solus added, "We may be replacing one threat with another." The elder Estrene's expression grew solemn. "The historical records about humans are incomplete, but one thing was consistent: they are creatures of contradiction, capable of tremendous violence, yes, but also of surprising compassion. They fight fiercely for causes they believe in, especially when protecting others." "Let's hope those records are accurate," Solus replied, watching as the small, angular shuttle launched from the Nemesis and began its approach toward the Celestial Harmony. "Because we're about to invite predators into our midst, and pray they hunt only our enemies. The human way of war." The diplomatic suite of the Celestial Harmony had hosted delegates from hundreds of worlds across the Estrene Alliance. Its design reflected the Estrene philosophy of harmony: flowing lines, soothing colors that shifted subtly according to the emotional resonance in the room, and ambient music composed of mathematical patterns found in celestial bodies. None of that seemed to impress Captain Marcus Thorne and his delegation. The humans moved through the space with an alertness that bordered on paranoia, their eyes constantly scanning, bodies positioned to maintain clear lines of sight to exits. While the Estrenes naturally drifted in graceful arcs when walking, humans moved with purpose. Direct lines, efficient turns. "Impressive ship you've got," Captain Thorne remarked, though his tone suggested clinical assessment rather than admiration. "Must be, what, 4 kilometers long?" 5.3, Commander Solus corrected. The Celestial Harmony serves as both our primary diplomatic vessel and central command for this sector. Thorn nodded, running a hand along a nearby wall panel that rippled with soft light at his touch. Beautiful. Not very practical from a combat perspective, though. Too many windows, for one thing. The transparencies are reinforced quantum glass, Science Director Naira explained. Stronger than any conventional material. Still a structural weakness, replied Lieutenant Commander Diane Chen, Thorn's second-in-command. Unlike her captain's gruff demeanor, Chen spoke with precision, her eyes constantly calculating. Any material can fail under sufficient stress. The Astrian delegation exchanged troubled glances. This was not how first contact scenarios typically unfolded. Perhaps we should review the tactical situation, suggested Strategic Officer Varen, guiding them toward the central holographic display. As the three-dimensional map of Astrian territory materialized, 32 star systems rendered in glowing blue, with red markers indicating Vex incursions, Captain Thorn's demeanor shifted. The casual assessment disappeared, replaced by intense focus. He circled the display slowly, occasionally murmuring to Chen, who made notes on a primitive-looking handheld device. You've lost 7 outposts in 3 months, Thorn observed. Always the same pattern. They hit hard, overwhelm defenses, quickly, harvest materials, and move on to the next target. Correct, confirmed Varen. Our predictive models indicate they're systematically working their way toward our core worlds. At current progression, they'll reach Astrian Prime within 60 days. Thorn exchanged a meaningful look with Chen. Resource-driven expansion with a side of xenocide. Classic move. We've seen it before. From whom? Asked Commander Solis. Ourselves, historically speaking, Thorn replied matter-of-factly. Before we unified. Old Earth history isn't pretty. Before Solis could process this disturbing revelation, Captain Thorn reached into the holographic display, his hands disrupting the perfect blue light. Show me your fleet positions. Reluctantly, Varen added this classified information to the display. Dozens of blue markers appeared, representing Astrian vessels distributed across their territory. You've got your fleet spread too thin, Thorn said immediately. Defensive posture around key installations. That's why you're losing. Our strategic doctrine prioritizes protecting civilian populations, Solis explained. Admirable, but it's getting you killed, Thorn countered. The Vex have the initiative. They choose when and where to hit, while you're reactive, always a step behind. He turned to face Commander Solis directly. You need to punch them in the nose. Hard. Make them reconsider the cost of this campaign. We've attempted counterstrikes, Varen objected. Our vessels were outmatched. Because you attacked like Astrians, Chen interjected. Predictable formations, conventional approaches, adherence to tactical doctrines the Vex have already analyzed and countered. Thorn nodded. We need to show them something they haven't seen before. Something unpredictable, irrational by their standards. A smile spread across his face, revealing teeth that seemed too sharp in the soft light of the diplomatic suite. Something human. Within hours, the command center of the Celestial Harmony had been transformed. Captain Thorn insisted on establishing a joint tactical operations hub, much to the discomfort of the Astrian officers unused to direct human presence in their most sensitive area. The humans had brought equipment from their shuttle, crude by Astrian standards, but evidently effective for their purposes. They spoke in rapid, clipped sentences filled with military jargon that the translation systems struggled to interpret correctly. You want to what? Commander Solis asked, certain she had misunderstood Captain Thorn's proposal. Bait them, Thorn repeated patiently. We make them think a key Astrian vessel is damaged and vulnerable. When they move to attack, we spring the trap. Using your vessel as bait would be suicide, Varen argued. Our sensors indicate the next Vex patrol will include at least 3 heavy cruisers. Not the Nemesis, Thorn clarified. We're going to create a false signature that mimics your flagship. Meanwhile, The real celestial harmony will be hidden in the nebula's radiation field along with my ship and whatever combat vessels you can scramble in the next 12 hours. Naira's bioluminescence flickered with concern. The nebula's radiation would disrupt our systems. We'd be flying blind. That's why we brought these, Chen said, indicating the equipment they had installed. Modified sensors designed to function in extreme conditions. We developed them for operations near pulsars. Even if we could hide there, Solus argued, your plan requires us to attack Vex warships directly. Our previous engagements have proven that conventional tactics don't work. Thorn finished for her. We're not going to fight conventionally. Over the next several hours, Captain Thorn outlined a strategy so unorthodox that several Astrine officers questioned whether the translation was functioning correctly. Rather than engaging the Vex in traditional space combat, Thorn proposed using the nebula's natural properties, electromagnetic distortion, radioactive dust clouds, and unpredictable plasma discharges, as weapons. Your ships have exceptional shields, he explained, designed to withstand energy-based attacks. But they're calibrated for directed energy, not the chaotic patterns of a nebula. We'll force the Vex to follow us in, then hit them while their systems are compromised. This plan violates every principle of our tactical doctrine, Varen protested. Exactly, Thorn replied with a predatory grin. That's why it might actually work. As preparations continued, Science Director Naira found herself observing the humans with growing fascination. While most of the Astrine crew maintained a polite distance, she approached Lieutenant Chen during a rare quiet moment. May I ask you something, Lieutenant? Chen looked up from her work. Of course. Your species, the historical records we have suggest you evolved in an unusually hostile environment. Is that accurate? Chen considered this. Earth isn't particularly hostile by universal standards, but we evolved as both predator and prey. That shapes a species' psychology. How so? Naira asked, genuinely curious. Astrines evolved from communal herbivores, correct? Your entire biology is optimized for cooperation, perception, processing complex information. Chen gestured to Naira's bioluminescent patterns. Even your communication is multidimensional. Naira nodded. While humans evolved as persistence predators, Chen said matter-of-factly, not the strongest or fastest, but the most relentless. We would chase prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. That requires certain psychological traits, determination, adaptability, aggression when necessary. And these traits manifest in your approach to warfare, Naira suggested. Among other things, Chen agreed. But there's more to it. During our history, humans faced repeated extinction-level threats, ice ages, pandemics, resource depletion, our own weapons. Each crisis acted as an evolutionary filter, selecting for resilience, creativity under pressure, and yes, sometimes ruthlessness. Yet you developed advanced technology, art, culture, Naira observed. Chen smiled slightly. Those aren't contradictions, Director. They're complementary. The same drive that makes us dangerous, our restlessness, our dissatisfaction with limitations, also pushes us to create, explore, improve. Their conversation was interrupted by alarms. On the main view screen, sensors showed a Vex patrol changing course, moving toward the false signature the human Astrine team had deployed. They've taken the bait, announced Varen, surprise evident in his voice. Of course they have, Thorn said confidently, entering the command center with Commander Solus. Predators can't resist wounded prey. Time to remind them what it feels like to be hunted instead. The next 8 hours unfolded in a manner that would later be studied in Astrine military academies for generations. The Celestial Harmony, alongside the Nemesis, and 3 Astrine combat vessels that arrived in response to Solus's call, executed Captain Thorn's unorthodox strategy with remarkable effectiveness. Hidden within the nebula's chaotic embrace, the Allied ships used precisely calculated maneuvers to herd the Vex cruisers deeper into the radiation field. The Vex, Their sensors, compromised by the nebula's interference, found their targeting systems increasingly unreliable. When they attempted to withdraw, the Nemesis demonstrated capabilities that stunned even the Astrine officers who had begun to appreciate human ingenuity. The human vessel accelerated at rates that should have crushed its structural integrity, executing turns that defied conventional physics. Its weapons, primitive by Astrine standards in design, but devastating in application, fired not at the Vex ships directly but at specific points in the nebula, triggering cascading reactions that battered the enemy vessels with radiation waves and plasma surges. "How are they withstanding those G-forces?" Naira whispered to Commander Solis as they watched the Nemesis perform yet another impossible maneuver. "Inertial dampeners," replied Lieutenant Chen, who had remained aboard the Celestial Harmony as liaison. "Crude by your standards, but effective. And our crew is physiologically conditioned to withstand extreme conditions." "Even so," Naira persisted, "the human body has limits." Chen's expression grew solemn. "Captain Thorne and his bridge crew will spend days in medical recovery after this. They know that. They accepted it when they took the mission." This casual mention of self-sacrifice for tactical advantage sent a chill through the Astrine command center. When the battle concluded 3 hours later, 2 Vex cruisers had been destroyed and a third severely damaged. The Nemesis showed signs of battle damage but remained operational. The Astrian vessels, under Captain Thorne's guidance, had sustained only minor damage. As the Allied fleet regrouped outside the nebula, the mood aboard the Celestial Harmony was one of cautious optimism. "First time the Vex have been dealt a significant defeat in this sector," Varen noted, reviewing the battle data. "The tactics employed were unorthodox, but undeniably effective." "This is just the beginning," Commander Solis replied, her gaze fixed on the Nemesis through the view screen. "Captain Thorne has requested a direct meeting with the Astrine High Council. He says Earth is prepared to commit significant forces to counter the Vex threat." "In exchange for what?" asked Naira, voicing the concern many felt. "That," Solis said quietly, "is the question that keeps me awake." When Captain Thorne returned to the Celestial Harmony 12 hours later, the changes were evident. His movements were stiffer, his face drawn with exhaustion beneath a mask of professional composure. Medical scans would later reveal multiple microfractures in his skeletal structure, internal bruising, and neurochemical imbalances consistent with extreme stress, all consequences of the maneuvers he had executed during battle. None of these injuries were mentioned as he strode into the command center and offered a formal nod to Commander Solis. "One victory doesn't win a war," he said without preamble, "but it changes the psychology of it. The Vex thought they were the apex predator in this sector. Now they know different." "We've analyzed the battle data," Varen reported. "The Vex will adapt their tactics for future engagements." "So will we," Thorne replied. "But more importantly, I've received authorization from Earth Command. The First Fleet has mobilized. 47 combat vessels are en route to this sector. Estimated arrival: 6 days." The announcement sent ripples of both hope and anxiety through the command center. 47 vessels," Solis repeated. "Your civilization committed that many resources based on a single distress call." Thorne's expression hardened slightly. "We have our reasons, Commander. The Vex aren't unknown to us. We've encountered similar species before, expansionist, resource-driven, viewing other sentient life as either competition or fodder. Earth has a policy regarding such threats." "And what policy is that?" asked Elder Qasim, speaking for the first time since the humans' arrival. Captain Thorne turned to the ancient Astrine, his voice dropping to a tone that resonated with grim determination. "Threat containment through decisive action," he stated. "Or to put it in less diplomatic terms, hit them hard enough, fast enough, and thoroughly enough that they never consider expansion in our direction again." The silence that followed was broken only by the ambient hum of the ship's systems. "You speak as though your species has been at war for its entire history," Naira observed quietly. "Not its entire history," Thorne corrected. Just most of it. He turned back to Commander Solus. The coming days will be difficult. The Vex will retaliate, probably against civilian targets to demonstrate their displeasure. We need to prepare your people for that reality. Our civilians have no experience with warfare, Solus said, concern evident in her voice. Then they'll need to learn quickly, Thorn replied, not unkindly, but with unmistakable firmness. In the meantime, my tactical team has identified 3 Vex supply bases within striking distance. If we hit them simultaneously, we can disrupt their logistics chain before they can reorganize. As Captain Thorn outlined his plan, Commander Solus found herself studying the human with new understanding. These were not simply skilled warriors. They were beings shaped by conflict in ways the Estrenes could barely comprehend. Their history, their biology, their very psychology had been forged in the crucible of struggle. The Estrene Alliance had achieved peace through technological advancement and diplomatic finesse. Humans, it seemed, had achieved something different. They had mastered war itself, turning it into a science as precise and developed as any Estrene discipline. As the joint planning session continued, Solus caught Elder Kasim's eye across the room. The ancient Estrene nodded slightly, a gesture that conveyed volumes. They had indeed invited predators into their midst, creatures of contradiction who could be both terrifyingly violent and fiercely protective. The question now was whether the Estrene Alliance, having forgotten the art of warfare, could remember how to direct such formidable allies without losing their own identity in the process. Victory at any cost. The Great Hall of the Estrene High Council had stood for over 4,000 years, its crystalline dome filtering the light of Estrene Prime's twin suns into patterns that shifted with the deliberations below. For centuries, it had been a place of measured debate, thoughtful consideration, and gradual consensus. Today, it echoed with voices raised in urgent disagreement. This human proposal is madness, declared Councillor Vex, his bioluminescence flashing agitated patterns. A direct assault on the Vex homeworld would require committing the entirety of our remaining fleet alongside their forces. What alternative do you suggest? Countered Councillor Thera, one of the few military voices on the predominantly civilian council. In the 30 days since the humans arrived, they've successfully repelled 6 major Vex offensives. Without them, we would already be facing extinction. Commander Ilara Solus stood silently at the periphery of the debate, watching Captain Marcus Thorn as he observed the proceedings. The human commander had changed in the month since their first meeting. His uniform now incorporated elements of Estrene design, a diplomatic gesture, though the insignia of Earth's united military remained prominent on his collar. More tellingly, he had adapted to Estrene customs with surprising ease, learning to modulate his naturally abrupt manner when the situation required. The Estrenes had changed as well. Throughout the council chamber, Solus noted military postures replacing the traditionally flowing stance of her people. Many council members now wore the simplified attire adopted by those working alongside humans, garments designed for functionality rather than the usual expressions of personal philosophy through color and form. The Vex regroup even now, continued Councillor Thera. Our intelligence indicates they're marshalling forces from across their territory for a decisive strike against Estrene Prime itself. This is no longer about outposts or resource worlds. This is existential. Captain Thorn, having been invited to address the council, stepped forward. The chamber quieted immediately. Honored councilors, he began, his voice measured in a way that had become familiar to Solus, the tone he adopted when trying to convey urgent military matters to civilian leadership. The Vex operate on a simple principle: overwhelming force applied relentlessly. Our defensive victories, while significant, have not changed their strategic calculation. They believe that, given enough time and resources, they can wear down our combined forces. He gestured toward the holographic display at the center of the chamber, which showed the current disposition of forces across the sector. The Earth First Fleet has now fully deployed to your territory, complementing your remaining vessels. Together, we present a formidable defensive line. His expression hardened slightly. But defense alone won't end this war. The Vex have demonstrated their intent with brutal clarity. Total domination of Estrene space. And your solution is to attack their home system. Asked Counselor Vex incredulously. Even with your impressive military capability, the Vex outnumber our combined fleets 3-1. Numbers aren't everything in warfare, Thorn replied calmly. The Vex expect us to continue defensive operations. They don't anticipate a major offensive striking at their center of power because, by their calculation, it would be irrational to commit our forces to such a high-risk operation. It is irrational, insisted Counselor Vex. By Estrene standards, perhaps, Thorn acknowledged, but not by human ones. Throughout our history, we've faced numerically superior forces and prevailed through audacity, maneuverability, and psychological warfare. He paused, looking around the chamber. The Vex think like a hive, collectively, logically, without imagination. We can use that against them. High Counselor Zanara, who had remained silent during the debate, finally spoke. Her advanced age was evident in the pale blue of her skin, but her voice carried the weight of centuries of wisdom. What exactly are you proposing, Captain Thorn? Not in tactical terms, but in principle. Thorn met her gaze steadily. I'm proposing we change the nature of this conflict, High Counselor. Until now, the Vex have dictated the terms of engagement, when to attack, where to strike, how to proceed. We've been reactive, defensive. My proposal is to seize the initiative, force them to respond to us instead. In military terms, we call this getting inside the enemy's decision loop. And the risk? Zanara pressed. Significant, Thorn admitted without hesitation. The joint fleet would be committed to a decisive engagement far from Estrene territory. If we fail, your homeworld would have minimal defense during the time required for remaining forces to return. And if we succeed, the Vex Central Authority would be destroyed or severely compromised, their command structure disrupted, their expansion halted not just temporarily, but potentially permanently. High Counselor Zanara turned to Commander Solis. You have worked closely with Captain Thorn and the human forces. What is your assessment? All eyes in the chamber turned to Solis. She felt the weight of the moment. 12,000 years of Estrene civilization hung in the balance, dependent now on a strategy proposed by a species they had known for barely a month. I believe Captain Thorn's assessment is correct, she said finally. The Vex operate on patterns. Predictable, logical, efficient. They expect us to behave according to established Estrene doctrine, which would indeed make this proposal seem irrational. She paused, gathering her thoughts. But perhaps that is precisely why it might succeed. In our long history, the Estrene Alliance has never launched a preemptive strike against an enemy's center of power. The Vex will not have prepared for such an eventuality. The chamber remained silent as her words settled among the council members. Commander Solis continued, her voice finding new strength. I have witnessed the humans in battle. Their tactics are unorthodox by our standards, but undeniably effective. More importantly, I have observed how the Vex respond to human unpredictability, with confusion, hesitation, tactical errors that would be uncharacteristic against conventional opponents. And what of the risk to Estrene Prime? Asked Counselor Vex. Substantial, Solis acknowledged. But I remind the Council that defensive operations alone have not stemmed the Vex advance. Each victory we achieve is followed by a stronger response from their forces. It is, as humans would say, a war of attrition that we cannot mathematically win. High Counselor Zanara's luminescence dimmed thoughtfully as she absorbed these perspectives. After several moments of contemplation that felt eternal to those present, she spoke. The Estrene Alliance has stood as a beacon of peaceful cooperation for 12 millennia, she began. We have cultivated arts, sciences, and philosophies that have enriched countless worlds. Yet now we face an enemy that sees these achievements as nothing more than resources to be harvested. Her ancient eyes settled on Captain Thorn. We contacted your people because we needed warriors. It would be folly to seek your help and then reject your counsel on matters of war. A murmur spread through the chamber as the High Counselor's position became clear. "The joint offensive is approved," she declared. "May the stars witness that we did not choose this path, but neither will we perish without defending all we have built." Captain Thorne gave a respectful nod that somehow conveyed both gratitude for their trust and the heavy responsibility he accepted with it. As the council session concluded, Commander Solis found herself walking alongside Captain Thorne through the crystalline corridors of the government complex. "Your support was crucial," Thorne said quietly. "I spoke the truth as I've observed it," Solis replied. "Though I confess, there are aspects of your strategy you haven't shared with the council. Or with me." Thorne's pace slowed slightly. "Perceptive. The Astrine mind is designed to recognize patterns," she reminded him. "You've been communicating with Earth Command daily. Your officers prepare contingencies that never appear in our joint briefings. Would you believe me if I said it was standard operational security? I would not." Thorne stopped walking, turning to face her directly. Around them, the corridor's crystal walls refracted light in patterns that seemed unusually agitated, reflecting the tension of the moment. "The offensive against the Vex homeworld is genuine," he assured her. "But you're right, there are elements I haven't disclosed. Such as, Earth is committing more than just the First Fleet to this conflict," Thorne revealed. "As we speak, the Third and Fifth Fleets are en route to this sector." Solis's bioluminescence flickered with surprise. "That's nearly half of Earth's military strength, based on the data you shared. Why commit such forces without informing the Council?" "Politics," Thorne replied with a hint of the wry humor that occasionally surfaced through his professional demeanor. "Your Council took 30 days to approve this offensive. Earth Command made their decision in hours. Why? The Astrine Alliance, while grateful, has no formal treaty with Earth. You owe us no such commitment." Thorne's expression grew serious. "The Vex aren't just a threat to the Astrine Alliance, Commander. Their resource consumption, their expansion model. Earth has modeled the projections. If they consolidate their hold on Astrine territory, the Vex would eventually threaten human space as well." "Preemptive defense," Solis realized. "Exactly. But there's more." Thorne hesitated, then continued more quietly. "We've encountered the Vex before, or at least a species very similar to them." "What? When?" "Approximately 70 years ago, a Vex-like race attempted to establish a foothold in a system near Earth space. The encounter was brief and conclusive. Earth eliminated the threat and quarantined the system." Solis struggled to process this revelation. "Your people have already defeated a species like the Vex. How is this not relevant information for our alliance?" Earth Command felt that revealing our previous encounter might complicate the diplomatic situation, Thorne explained. "The measures taken were extreme by Astrine standards." "What measures?" Solis pressed. Thorne's eyes held hers steadily. "The system in question is now uninhabitable. A defensive measure to ensure no trace of the hostile species remained to potentially regenerate or signal others of its kind." Solis felt a chill pass through her luminescent patterns, the Astrine equivalent of a shudder. "You rendered an entire system uninhabitable as a defensive measure." "It wasn't a decision made lightly," Thorne said quietly. "But Earth's history has taught us that existential threats require absolute responses." Before Solis could reply, Thorne's communication device signaled. He checked it, and his expression immediately hardened. "The Vex have launched their offensive against Astrine Prime," he reported. "Earlier than our intelligence predicted. All forces are being recalled for defensive operations. The Council just approved your offensive strategy," Solis said, confusion evident in her voice. "And now circumstances have changed." Thorne replied, already moving toward the command center with Solis hurrying alongside him. "The Vex must have detected our preparations. They've accelerated their timeline." Within hours, the situation had transformed dramatically. The Vex Armada approaching Estrene Prime was nearly twice the size anticipated by intelligence estimates, over 300 warships of various classes, with heavy cruisers forming the vanguard of their assault. In the command center aboard the Celestial Harmony, which had taken position as the flagship of the defensive line, tension permeated the air. Multiple Vex battle groups detected entering the system, reported Strategic Officer Varen. Their approach vector suggests a multi-pronged assault targeting orbital defense platforms first, then primary population centers. Standard Vex Protocol. Observe Lieutenant Commander Chen. Eliminate defensive capabilities, then secure the planet for resource extraction. Commander Solis studied the tactical display, where the incoming Vex forces appeared as a red wave washing toward the blue markers representing the combined Estrene human fleet. "We're outnumbered more than 2-1, she noted grimly. 3-1 when their secondary wave arrives, corrected Captain Thorne, who had been unusually quiet since the alert sounded. The situation has changed, Commander. Our planned offensive is no longer viable. Then what is our strategy? Asked Solis. We cannot win a defensive engagement against these numbers. A strange expression crossed Thorne's face, something Solis had not seen before. It took her a moment to recognize it, as resolve tinged with something that might have been regret. No, we can't, he agreed. Which is why we're not going to fight defensively. He tapped a sequence into his command console, and the tactical display shifted. New markers appeared at the edge of the system, dozens of them, approaching rapidly from an unexpected vector. What are those? Varen asked, confusion evident in his voice. The Third Fleet, Thorne replied simply. They've been accelerating at maximum burn for the past 20 hours. I ordered their approach trajectory modified when we detected the Vex advance. Solis stared at him. You had reinforcements waiting just outside our system, without informing Estrene Command. A contingency, Thorne said, not quite meeting her eyes. One I hoped wouldn't be necessary. Before Solis could press him further, Thorne turned to address the combined command staff. The situation has forced our hand. We're implementing Operation Hammerfall, effective immediately. Operation Hammerfall, echoed Varen. This wasn't in our joint battle plans. It's a human contingency. Chen explained, her expression as serious as her captain's. A scenario developed for circumstances where conventional defensive operations are insufficient. Captain Thorne's fingers danced across his console, bringing up a new tactical projection. The Third Fleet will emerge behind the Vex Armada, cutting off their retreat. Simultaneously, our combined forces will execute a pincer movement, dividing their formation and disrupting their command coordination. The plan unfolded on the display, bold, aggressive, and incredibly risky. The human vessels would engage at point-blank range, negating the Vex's numerical advantage through proximity that bordered on suicidal. Meanwhile, Estrene ships would target specific vulnerabilities in Vex vessel design that human analysts had identified through previous engagements. This strategy commits every ship we have. Solis observed. If it fails, Estrene Prime will be defenseless. It won't fail, Thorne stated with absolute conviction, because the Vex, for all their computational power, cannot comprehend what we're about to do. Their tactical algorithms are based on risk-reward calculations that assume rational adversaries. And we're not rational, asked Varen. Not by their definition, Thorne replied with a grim smile. Initiate Operation Hammerfall. All ships, battle stations. What followed would later be recorded in Estrene historical archives as the Battle of Estrene Prime, the most significant naval engagement in the 12,000-year history of their civilization. The human vessels moved with what appeared to be reckless abandon, accelerating to velocities that strained their structural integrity. Instead of maintaining formation as Estrene doctrine would dictate, they scattered into seemingly chaotic patterns, each captain executing independent attack runs against Vex vessels many times their size. The Vex response was exactly as Captain Thorne had predicted: confusion, followed by attempts to regroup into defensive formations that left them vulnerable to the coordinated strikes of Estrine vessels approaching from calculated vectors. When the Third Fleet emerged behind the Vex Armada, cutting off their retreat, the battle's momentum shifted decisively. Caught between two forces, their formations disrupted, the Vex found their numerical advantage neutralized by the humans' willingness to engage at ranges considered suicidal by conventional tactical standards. Aboard the Celestial Harmony, Commander Solus watched in astonishment as the battle unfolded. Human captains communicated in rapid-fire jargon, coordinating maneuvers that seemed improvised yet devastatingly effective. The Estrian vessels, following Captain Thorn's battle plan, executed precision strikes against Vex command ships and communications arrays, further disrupting their coordination. "The Vex flagship is attempting to withdraw," reported Varen, incredulity evident in his voice. "They're retreating." "Not retreating," corrected Thorn. "Regrouping. They're attempting to reform their lines behind their heavy cruisers. Target those vessels specifically, disrupt their defensive screen." As the battle reached its climax, Solus noticed Captain Thorn receive a private communication. His expression changed subtly. A tightening around the eyes, a slight nod of confirmation. "Captain," she inquired. "The Fifth Fleet has arrived," he announced to the command center. "They're positioned at the system's edge, ready to pursue any Vex vessels that attempt to escape." "The Fifth Fleet as well?" Solus asked quietly, for his ears only. "You committed 3 fleets to this engagement." "As I said, Commander, Earth takes existential threats seriously." 4 hours later, the battle concluded with a victory so complete that the Estrine analysts initially refused to accept their own sensor data. Of the 300 Vex vessels that had entered the system, fewer than 20 escaped. The combined Estrine human fleet had suffered losses: 17 Estrine ships destroyed, 32 human vessels significantly damaged or lost, but Estrine Prime stood secure. In the aftermath, as damage reports flooded in and medical teams worked frantically to treat the wounded of both species, Commander Solus found Captain Thorn in an observation deck, staring out at the debris field that now orbited Estrine Prime, the remnants of the most decisive space battle in the sector's history. "Your strategy succeeded," she said simply, joining him at the viewport. "At a cost," he replied, his voice heavy. "Over 2,000 human lives lost. Nearly 1,000 of your people. To save billions," Solus reminded him. "The Vex would have shown no mercy had they reached our homeworld." Thorn nodded, though the gesture lacked conviction. "You know, throughout human history, we've told ourselves that same thing to justify the terrible costs of warfare. It was necessary. The alternative was worse. Usually, we were right. Sometimes, we weren't." "You doubt this victory?" Solus asked, surprised. "No, not this victory. It was necessary, and the alternative was indeed worse." He turned to face her. "I doubt whether the cycle ever truly ends. The Vex are defeated for now, but there will be others. There always are." "Perhaps," Solus acknowledged. "But when that day comes, the Estrine Alliance will not face the threat alone. Your people have shown us what it means to stand against extinction, not just with technology or numbers, but with the will to prevail regardless of the odds." A small smile touched Thorn's lips. "That's humanity's greatest strength, Commander. Not our weapons or tactics, but our stubborn refusal to accept defeat even when it seems inevitable." Their conversation was interrupted by a communication alert. The holoprojector activated to reveal High Counselor Zenara. "Captain Thorn, Commander Solus," she greeted them formally. "The Council requests your presence. The ambassador from Earth has arrived to discuss the terms of our new alliance." "Ambassador?" Solus questioned after the transmission ended. "I wasn't aware Earth had appointed a diplomatic representative." "There's a lot happening that you're not aware of," Thorn admitted. "Earth has been preparing for this moment since we received your first transmission. The victory today isn't just military. It's the beginning of something much larger." As they made their way to the council chambers, Solus reflected on the transformation that had occurred in such a short time. The Estrine Alliance, peaceful and isolated for millennia, had now been thrust onto a larger galactic stage. Their contact with humanity had saved them from extinction, but it had also changed them irrevocably. The council chamber was filled to capacity when they arrived. High Counselor Zenaris stood at the center, alongside a human woman Solus had never seen before. Tall, dignified, with silver hair and an air of quiet authority that commanded attention without demanding it. "Commander Solus, Captain Thorn," Zenara greeted them. "May I present Ambassador Eleanor Chen, diplomatic representative of Earth and its colonies." Solus noted the surname, a relation to Lieutenant Commander Chen, perhaps. The ambassador inclined her head in acknowledgement. "Commander, Captain, your joint victory today marks a historic moment for both our peoples." Her voice carried clearly through the chamber. "The Estrine Alliance has stood as a beacon of civilization in this sector for 12,000 years. Earth and its colonies, though younger, have developed in our own unique direction." Ambassador Chen gestured to a holographic display that materialized beside her, showing a map of the galaxy with Earth and Estrine territories highlighted. "Today, the High Council and I have signed a preliminary agreement establishing the foundation for a new interstellar accord, one that combines Estrine wisdom and cultural advancement with human military protection and technological exchange." Murmurs spread through the chamber as the implications became clear. This was not merely a military alliance, but the beginning of a fundamental realignment of power in the sector. "The Vex threat has been neutralized for now," continued the ambassador, "but our analysts agree with Estrine assessments. This region of space faces numerous potential challenges in the coming decades. Together, we can meet these challenges more effectively than either civilization could alone." As the formal proceedings continued, Captain Thorn moved to stand beside Commander Solus. "You knew this was coming," she said quietly. "I suspected," he admitted. "Military first, then diplomacy. It's how Earth has always operated." "And the future?" Solus asked. "What happens when your people grow bored with peaceful cooperation? When the warrior instinct you've described seeks new outlets?" Thorn considered this seriously. "That's where your people come in, Commander. Humans need challenges, purposes, frontiers. The Astrian passion for exploration, for understanding, for creating beauty. These provide direction for our restless energy." He nodded toward the ambassador and High Counselor, deep in conversation. "They understand that. It's why this alliance isn't just pragmatic. It's necessary for both our species." As the ceremony concluded, Solus found herself standing at the great crystal window overlooking Estrine Prime. The planet's twin suns cast their light across the gleaming cities that had stood for millennia, symbols of Estrine achievement and stability. Now, in orbit above, human vessels moved alongside Estrine ships, different in design, purpose, and philosophy, yet united in common cause. Captain Thorn joined her, his reflection appearing beside hers in the crystal. "Your people asked for warriors," he said quietly. "You got more than you bargained for." "Perhaps we received exactly what we needed," Solus replied. "Not just warriors, but a reminder of something we had forgotten in our long peace." "What's that?" Her luminescence brightened as she turned to face him directly. "That survival sometimes requires adaptation. That civilization must occasionally remember how to fight for its existence, and that even in darkness, unexpected allies can bring new light." Above them, Earth's Fifth Fleet began deploying into defensive positions around Estrine space, the vanguard of a new era where humanity's warriors stood watch over ancient civilizations, their savage instincts channeled toward protection rather than conquest. The galaxy would never be the same, and neither would the two species whose destinies had become intertwined in the crucible of existential threat. In the vast reaches of space, news of the Vex defeat spread rapidly. Other powers, some curious, some cautious, some hostile, took note of the unexpected alliance between the peaceful Estrine and the newly emerged humans. The balance of power had shifted, and with it, the future of an entire sector of the galaxy.